Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ranch Remodel. You can see I'm standing in the sunroom. It's one of my favorite spaces in the house. You can see we have that big old 13-foot window here behind me. We have those tilt and turn windows. You can see we have them open here. We're doing a bunch of the trim work. But today, we're returning to talk about the ceiling. So if you remember in the earlier video, we talked about this tray ceiling that we were putting in. And here it is. It's come to life. It's installed. It's completed. You can see here, we have this 24-inch tray that runs around the perimeter of the room. And then we have this recessed ceiling that falls about 4 inches inside of that. It's all made out of a vertical grain clear fir. We had all these boards cut with a little micro groove on them. So it's kind of a small version of a V groove. So we ran that tray, we pushed this up inside, and then inside the recess, rather than just run a series of boards either this way or that way, what I did was I broke the scale of the ceiling down even further. So we have these two kind of quadrant boards here that break up this inset into 4 pieces. Now, those are set at 1x6, and that was intentional because right here where they cross, we're going to mount down this contemporary looking fan, and the connection piece to it is about 5 inches. So we needed almost all of that so that we can properly have that housing connect to the ceiling system there. But you'll notice that those 1x6s create these 4 quadrants. And what I did was I changed the direction of the boards 90 degrees. So we have those going that way over here. They switch back to match that, and then they switch back again here. And I did that to break down the scale of the ceiling. So you didn't come out here and just have this 16-foot wood ceiling. It offers a little bit of intrigue by having this different texture of having the lines going in different directions, but it also breaks down the scale. And it takes this very large room with this abundance of sunlight, views to the backyard, and breaks it down into a much more comfortable scale. That combined with the color of fir has that nice kind of orange wood glow to it is just going to make this a superb sitting room. Place to come hang out, read a book, have coffee, have that conversation with a friend or relative, and just make this an exceptional place. So why don't we go back to the studio and we'll break out Big Red. We'll talk about a few of these details. And we'll go from there. So let's head on back to the studio. Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio. Hopefully you enjoyed that trip out to the job site. I got to be brutally honest with you. Any chance I get to sneak out to a job site, I'm on it. I cannot appreciate the craftsmanship of the fine men and women that I get the privilege to work with every week. So it's fun to sit here in the studio and think about things and draw them up and all of that good stuff. And yes, that's exciting, but there is nothing more exciting than seeing it come to life. So printed out a drawing. Of course, our friend Big Red is here. Let's take a look at this drawing. We'll dissect some of the design intent, some of the thoughts that went along with that sunroom ceiling, and let's get into it. Alrighty, so here's that sunroom ceiling drawing. You can see here we have a plan of the drawing here, and you'll grab a couple little sections there, details. You can see here the outline of the room, basically. And then we talked about while we were out there, to break down the scale, I actually did a little bit of a tray ceiling. Right? You can see that there, and you can see here, it basically measures about 20 inches across here. Right? This being the section across the ceiling here, basically to about there. But you can see there's that 20-inch tray soffit, and then it rises up roughly about 4 inches and then continues across, and then you can see here is that cross piece right there happening, and then the ceiling goes up and the micro groove boards then take place again. So we talked about it out there. So, you know guys from previous videos, I'm high on a sense of order, and I'm high on a sense of scale, and I love hierarchy. So all three of these play a role here, as well as symmetry. So let's talk about that sense of order. We have a large square, we have a smaller square, and we have yet smaller. They're not quite squares, but they are rectangles. And actually, the larger one probably isn't a perfect square either. I think it's a little longer than it is taller. But anyways, you get that sense of order, that there's this kind of stepping down, and we talked about that last time. What is that? Hierarchy, right? There is the main ceiling, there is that which we call the tray border, and then there's the 4 quadrants that make up the 4 smaller pieces in there. And by breaking that all down, we get a stronger sense of scale. Now, scale is basically proportion as it's directly related to me, right? So things that are twice my size are a larger scale than myself. Things that are half my size are smaller scale, right? So when it comes to scale, when I can break down things closer to my size, they feel more comfortable. So like I said, we could go in there, we could do this, say 16 by 17 wood ceiling, just run a series of fir planks across there, and it would have a certain look and a certain scale. It would certainly have order, because it would be just one simple organized layout. Or we could break that larger square down by roughly a 2-foot border there, and have this larger piece and smaller piece. So we have a sense of hierarchy there. But then we could take this smaller piece and break it down into those 4 quadrants and actually really establish a sense of scale. So this kind of now becomes my wingspan, right? Like, I understand one of these quadrants very simply, because if I got up there and extended my arms, I'd be pretty much coming very close to touching that end to end. So it makes me feel very comfortable when things move towards a scale that is associated with me personally. The hierarchy is represented. Again, we have that large square, the secondary square, and then the 4 representative polygons inside of that. And together, they all give a very strong sense of order. And I know if you saw the elevation video I did last week, you'll come to understand that, at least my belief is, if I can provide a very strong sense of order, then my mind can resolve what it's seeing very easily. If my mind can resolve what it's seeing very easily, then it gains a certain level of appreciation for what it's looking at, meaning that it looks at it, it understands it, and it loves it because it looks good, but it's easily understood. There's not things being placed in question, like, why did they do that? Why is that? How come that doesn't line up? That strong sense of order relates to a very strong appreciation. And appreciation is simply just another way of looking at how much I love something and how much I appreciate it, right? So that strong sense of order, in my belief, turns into a very strong sense of love. You walk into that room and go, wow, that is gorgeous. I love it. And you really don't have to sit there and state why. You just look at it and it makes sense. And when things make sense, we love them. So let's talk about this a little bit more. We did the tray ceiling on the outside. Couple questions that came into play. How do I deal with these corners? You can see here we did basically just what I would call a stitch corner. Some people would call it a herringbone, but you saw that in the video there. The couple other questions are, how do I deal with trim here? How do I deal with that 4-inch drop across there? And then, why did I turn these boards? Why? Because we could have easily made them all go the same direction, but you can see these go in that direction, these there, and these there, right? And that was just to offer a little bit of intrigue, because we had those micro grooves. By turning their distance, it makes this larger room feel a little bit more condensed. Now, it doesn't feel condensed in the sense of the distance between this wall and that wall, but there is some foreshortening when I change the directions of the boards rather than just having long boards going this way or long boards going that way. So breaking it up, you know, also helped in that respect. Now, one of the last things we had to deal with was we knew we wanted to put a fan here. So we had to make sure that these 6-inch boards, you can see here in the detail, were large enough so that when we bring in the fan housing, right, and that fan comes down from there, that we have a little bit of board on each side. So this gets into, you know, people always say, well, why should I hire you? Why should I hire an architect? Well, an architect does many things, right? We design from point A to point Z. But we also take a look at point Z back to A, which a lot of people don't, right? Everybody always wants to look forward and say, oh, let's do this. Let's do a nice tray ceiling. We'll put that in. But they might forget about thinking about the fan and thinking about what happens at point Z. As an architect, I like to get to point Z and say, okay, well, we're here, we have this wood ceiling, but now we want to insert a fan. Well, how do I back that up back to point A to ensure that the fan I want to put in makes sense to everything along the way? So it's kind of this little bit of a loop, right? We go out to where we want to go to the design, but we're forced to return and look at it and analyze it in a sense that we bring it all together. Another way that I've heard it explained, and one of my architecture professors said it very well, is that when we design, we analyze. We break things down into their components, and we get them from points A to Z. But then we have to take those points and synthesize them and bring them back to A to make sure that all those points along the way now make sense to where we really wanted to be and what our original design intent was. So we have that room for the fan. By breaking this into 4 quadrants, you can see we now have a nice sense of order for our 4 recessed lights. And because of this wood ceiling and how much intrigue is being inspired by this, we got some really nice 5-inch pyramidal type designer recess cans that are going to go in there. They're black in color or dark bronze. And they're really going to take that up a notch. So we're not just going in there and kind of slapping up your typical recess can and putting a white housing over it and calling it a day. We're trying to make sure that all of the things that we think about here make sense, right? And make sense in such a way that in the end, it all works very well. Before we go, let's just take a quick run through that section. So you can see that soffit was just basically a 2x4 soffit around the perimeter. And then we planked it out. Remember, we stitched those corners there and on all four sides. We added a little trim here because you always have a hard time getting that exactly right to the wall. And that just is just a different scale of help framing that in. Notice that this piece here that comes down and closes off the inside of the tray actually has a little lip to it right there. So it's shaped like the letter J. And the reason for that is that way there, this last board can seat on there. So there's a little bit of movement allowed in this system as the boards either take on moisture or subtract moisture content. And so if it moves a little, we have that little 1/4 of an inch lip that will make up the difference so we don't get any open joints there. You notice that little nib of a detail there, we simply repeated here. And we repeated that detail, why? Because we want to maintain that strong sense of order. We want to do repetitive details so that when it looks at it, it's, oh, every time this touches that, you get that little nib of a board. Well, that little nib just so happens to be dimensionally similar to the thickness of that board and this board over here. And so as they trace around the inside of each quadrant, they're all dimensionally similar. So basically, you have this trim that goes around each of these 4 quadrants, right? But that same trim also traces around the outside
And guess what? This dimension and that dimension, they're both 1 inch. They're all the same. So overall on that square, we get the same dimension. So the beauty of that is basically when I look up, I see that 1 inch there. I see the 1 inch there. I see the 1 inch on the inside, there, and I see it all around. And again, that heightens that sense of order. So anyways, that's all I got for the drawings. Well, everybody, time to put Big Red away till next time. But hopefully you enjoyed that video. That ceiling, I know the other barrel vaulted ceiling in that house is pretty damn spectacular, but I got to tell you, this one is running a really close second. Just to be inside that space is pretty incredible. And I'm very happy for my clients. They made some outstanding decisions, and you get to see them firsthand here. So anyways, that's it for this week. As always, if you haven't checked out some of my previous videos, go back, check them out. We have some that are leading up to these already, so you can kind of see the sequence of how we thought about things initially, how we executed them, and now we're starting to see the fruits of that labor. And check out my colleagues, Matt, Jake, Wade, Brent. You got 4 absolutely spectacular leaders in the industry there talking about what they do every day. And it's always a treat. As much as I love doing these videos, I look forward to watching their videos every week. As for me, you can find me on Instagram at Steve Baczek Architect there. I drop a bunch of these details. You can get some of the updates on my visits out there. Also, I have 2 colleagues, Jake Bruton and Peter Yost, that between the 3 of us, we make up what's called the Unbuild It podcast. And every couple weeks, we drop an episode where we dive deep into some concepts of building science. And along the way, occasionally one of us drops out in favor of having a industry expert come on and join 2 out of the 3 of us, and we talk to them about various things. So if you're not caught up on that, I recommend, it's a great resource. We get into it. Combined, I don't know, probably have close to 75, 80 years of experience. 70 of that being Peter Yost. No, just kidding, Peter. Anyways, check it all out. But until next time, long live our buildings, and we'll see you on the Build Show.